Hi, I'm here today to talk about Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. It's been a long time since I've done one of these updates. Those of you who've been following it will remember that I always said that The Empire Strikes Back is my favourite movie. I might possibly have to change that now down to Revenge of the Sith, purely because that is just fantastic and it's very cinematic and very dramatic. However, I think we'll find that Empire Strikes Back is the best of the original trilogy. Particularly, it doesn't necessarily just show the fact that bad guys can win, which I think is a more realistic prospect, but it also just gives a better story overall, much more realistic. Not least, it does have some fantastic model shots. I mean, who we all remember when we first saw the Super Star Destroyer, the Executor, and all the extra capture work that ILM have done. It just looks such a good movie, much more grounded. So, where do we start? Well, obviously we have to start on Hoth, the very start of the movie. It's one of the first movies that's got a lot of special effects to be shot on the snow. And as we all know from watching the DVDs, the kind of problems they had with doing that. It makes the entire galaxy much more open. It feels much more real. Whereas the first Star Wars films, Episode 4, A New Hope, it's fairly claustrophobic. Okay, you've got the desert, but that's about it. The rest of the time, you're really stuck in the Death Star. I suppose you've got those little bit of shots on the Yavin 4, but mostly it's stuck in the Death Star. Whereas this one, it feels much more of an epic adventure. You've got the ice world of Hoth, then you go to the jungle moon of Dagobah. You've got running around inside Cloud City, and even that's been made, was claustrophobic, now it's been made much more open as well with the special editions and the DVD editions, which is great. This also shows just how different the rebels are to the Empire. I guess before we didn't really know a lot about the rebels. They were just this force, they appeared out of nowhere at the end and they destroyed the Death Star, whoopee, but that's about it. Here we get to see the fact that the rebels, they do have a lot of good equipment, they do have good size, but in terms of proper military resources, we see just how powerful the Empire is. I think that's quite important here. It just gives you an idea of what the rebels are up against. The fact that it's the second part of the act as well just shows it's a darker act, which obviously was intentional, and that works really well. It does give a final sense of jeopardy. Perhaps before everything comes out, it's a fairy story. It all works out in the end. This one, you always got the feeling it wasn't going to work out quite so well, and it really shows. Another thing to note from here is just how much you focus on Harrison Ford's character, Han Solo. I'm a big fan of Harrison Ford, so for me that was a really good thing to see. He's a really good actor, and he had some good lines in there, some more believable lines, whereas perhaps in the first one, not so much. We also get to focus a bit more on Darth Vader. Not necessarily so much on his past, I mean, we know that from watching the original trilogy, but on what his motivations are. That he's not just a bad guy, he's not just there to make up the pieces, he's actually there to prove some jeopardy, and we discover obviously his relationship to Luke, which is really important. It changed the whole focus of the final part of the film, and certainly for the next film too. Overall, I still think Empire is a brilliant film. It's definitely worth watching. It introduced us to far more characters in the Star Wars universe, which perhaps the first one, while it has a lot of wacky aliens in the Cantina scene, that's about it. Other than that, everyone's human. This one has a lot more variety. Again, most people seem to be human. It's mainly a human rebellion against a human empire. Mostly white human at that as well. I know they added Lando, but even so, it's still very much white versus white humans. That's not really what the Star Wars universe is about. Though we do have the bounty hunter scene with all the different kinds of bounty hunters, from Boba Fett to Bosk to IG-88, which is really good. That does actually bode a question. How on earth did Darth Vader get all the bounty hunters assembled that quickly? Think about it, right? They're in the asteroid belt. Somehow all these bounty hunters from wherever they are in the galaxy, and I don't care about hyperspace, it still must take you a long time to get to where you're going from, suddenly assemble on board the Executor, and then they go out their separate ways. Something's not right there. They must all have been around that vicinity anyway. Bit too coincidental for me. And then, obviously, the big thing is, how on earth can Luke train to become a Jedi in what can only be at most a few days? I know people have gone back and retconned and say, you know, yes, the Millennium Falcon had a backup hyperdrive. It still took ages to get from Hoth to Bespin. But even if you allow a week, that's pretty easy training to go from being, you know, somebody who can make lightsabers come into your hand to someone who can take down on Darth Vader. Okay, he didn't win, but he still learned an awful lot in that week. I don't see it really. And of course, he also has to get to Dagobah. That must take a while. He's only in an X-wing, so a little bit problems with time. I think we can gloss over that. I think the important thing is the fact that it's just a good story. Again, as with all Star Wars films, don't read too much into it because you'll find all sorts of inconsistencies. I suppose it is another galaxy. Time could warp, you know, who knows. Either way, it's a great film. I do enjoy it. I rate it still as first or second overall in the saga. Very much worth watching. It sets things up very nicely for the third film. And I think that's the key thing. As I said before, outstanding work on the model shots. I think we all know the iconic marks of Star Wars are the Imperial AT-AT walkers and, of course, the Star Destroyers themselves. Instantly recognisable, and that's what we get lots of here. In fact, this is pretty much the only time we get proper walkers, aside from that brief one in the third film. And that is to appreciate it. It's a brilliant ground battle sequence. The only decent ground battle sequence in the entire saga, really, and that's something to be thankful for. Not much perhaps of a space battle sequence, we've still got that to look forward to, but it's just nice to get a kind of feel of the amount of hardware the Empire have. It's not just a Death Star that they had at the start, they have a whole fleet, and here we get to finally see that fleet. And it just, again, it shows what the Rebels are up against. Of course, at the end we get to see the Rebel fleet. Never seen them before. That's also a good thing. It just broadens the whole scope of it. The first one was like a teaser, this is what Star Wars can do. The second was this is what Star Wars is, and it is fantastic. So, very much enjoyable, well worth it, and I'm looking forward to when it comes out in 3D. Can you imagine seeing those Star Destroyers in 3D? That would be brilliant. So, enjoy, and I'll see you next for the next time review of Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.